today. You can always follow him on X Twitter at HBalzer721. Howard, I saw that you tweeted yesterday that quarterback Anthony Brown Jr., who's been on the Cardinals practice squad since October, was signed by the Bills to their practice squad. Would this allow him, if the team, wins on the weekend, and if something happens to a quarterback, would he be able to get on the active roster?
Well, I think the biggest thing there is they probably brought him in to be able to, mimic Lamar Jackson in practice.
Okay.
I have a feeling that's, what that was all about. Certainly you could be added to the roster or, elevated or something like that. But I think this was more about getting ready for this game specifically than anything else.
Howard, it's interesting. You hear that and you think back when Carson Palmer was leading the charge with the Cardinals. He gets hurt. They go pick up. Was it Lindley? Used for the Cardinals over in San Diego. Right. They picked him up like a week and a half. He comes over. Palmer's out. He starts. They go into Carolina and got waxed. That's just very rare to see anything like that with all your backups and your starter down.
No, exactly. And I think with the Bills situation, I'm trying to think. I believe Mitchell Trubisky is their main backup.
Yes.
To Josh Allen. So if anything would happen. Obviously, he's not Josh Allen, but at least, he's a guy that has played games in the NFL if something would happen. So, a lot of these teams, though, they're not that well fortified at that backup position, but certainly a guy who's there all year is at least going to have, the ability to do something if they had to go in, as opposed to someone who all of a sudden walks in here in this first week of the playoffs.
But the saving grace was that he was with the team there for a while. He knew the offense, so it wasn't as if some guy that just happened to come in. At least he knew the offense. That was the only saving grace for that, even though it fell for naught with that Cardinals team.
Yeah, no doubt. And I kind of remember that. I mean, that was a pretty brutal game there. Yeah. And so, it just shows once again, obviously, I mean, it's an understatement to say how important a quarterback is to a team. But, look at the 8 teams that are playing this week. 7 of the quarterbacks are first-round picks. Mm-hmm. The only one who's not is Jalen Hurts, who was a second-round pick. And 5 of the 7 first-round picks are guys that are with the team that drafted them. And the only 2 that aren't are 2 guys that were traded for each other, and that's Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford, who, they're not playing against each other in this game, but, those are the other 2, and they were first overall picks in the draft and ended up getting traded at some point, obviously, in their career.
Howard, with the teams that made the playoffs or those that are left, I'll just simplify it that way. What's the commonality with the teams that have moved on that you would like to see the Cardinals acquire or have?
Yeah, that's a great question because I know, and I've said this all along. And when Jonathan Gannon talked the day after the season, and he said about a conversation he had with Kyler Murray and talking about Kyler's talking, what we got to do? What do we got to do? And Jonathan Gannon said, well, it's not only about the teams that are in the playoffs that have that, top quarterback, but they're good teams. And that's what it comes down to. And when you look at all these, teams that are there, a lot of them, like Buffalo, and, are teams that have hardly had any injury all season. Sean Payton of the Broncos talked in his end of season press conference, I think it was yesterday, and he talked about how, hey, we've gotten through the last 2 years unscathed in injuries. And that's a big part of making the playoffs and being consistent. I know when anyone talks about injuries, the no excuses crowd says, oh, no excuses. All teams have injuries. Well, they all do to a degree, but there's obviously some that have a lot more than others. And the Cardinals certainly have had that in the last couple seasons. So that's one big thing most of the time for the teams that are alive this late, that they're they're relatively healthy, but they're good teams. And so a lot of times, if you're missing a couple, guy here or there, you have good enough depth to overcome that. But when you start losing, multiple guys at a certain position, which happens to teams, that's just really hard to overcome.
You make a great point there because the Rams were just strung out when they were matched up against the Cardinals. It was like the 3 of us were playing for the Rams. Now look at them, and the same can be said for the Detroit Lions with all of the injuries they had, and now they are apparently healthy again. Is there a team out there, or did you see the finals of these teams that are playing against each other, did you think that these would be the teams that would be competing right now?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it is. Certainly Minnesota, failed in the last 2 games of the season, and a certain amount of that. I mean, they had guys beat up on the offensive line, and that really hurt in trying to protect Sam Darnold. And obviously, that was a team that had the tied for the second best record in the NFL, and here they are, on the outside looking in. But for the most part, these were the teams that that are the high seeds, and that's not a surprise. I mean, Washington was a wild card, but heck, they beat a team that had fewer wins than them during the regular season. So just look at the wins, with Detroit and Kansas City, with 15 wins, and then you have Philadelphia with 14, and so those for the most part, when you're able to do that for the whole year, most of the time, not always obviously, but most of the time, that's going to follow through when you get into the postseason.
There's a lot going on in the National Football League as far as head coaches are concerned. Mike McCarthy let go in Dallas. Looking interview, looks like in Chicago. Just from your standpoint, what you hear with a lot of the chatter going on out there in reference to Deion Sanders, Cowboys, what are some of the latest in reference to? It sounds like those things are heating up. The admiration for Jerry Jones and each other. Is there a lot of smoke with this and hardly any fire? What are your thoughts on that?
That it's Jerry Jones is all about the show and all about being the center of attention. That's obvious. And Manuch, I don't know if you broke the story yet, but you and I are going to be interviewed for the Bears head coaching job.
And leave these guys? Are you kidding me? Come on, Howard.
I mean, they've got. I think they have 15 people they've already talked to.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I've always thought this, and I'll get back to your question. I've always thought this. I think a lot of times some of the
minute and a half
get off on the whole adrenaline of interviewing guys and having all this power and control, and I'm going to hire a new coach. And I think they just think that's really cool, having all this power and control. But they don't look when you fire guys every 1 or 2 years or whatever it is, that you're not helping your franchise. So, when you see all these guys being interviewed, then all this Deion Sanders smoke with Dallas. I mean, can anybody see Deion Sanders, who also has to be the show and has to be the face of the franchise? I mean, do you see him sharing that with Jerry Jones? I mean, come on. I mean, I'd love to see when Jerry says something that Deion doesn't agree with. I'd like to see him go off on his owner if that was to happen, as he does on the media. But, having said all that, we'll see where all this goes. I thought, with the Patriots, certainly, as soon as Gerard Mayo was fired, I mean, I wasn't the only one. Everybody thought, oh, well, Mike Grable's going to be their head coach. And then they made a joke of the Rooney Rule by interviewing 2 guys. And they're pretty solid coaches, don't get me wrong, Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton. But they haven't even been in the league for 2 years. And all of a sudden you're interviewing them as minority people to follow the procedures of the Rooney Rule. So everyone knew it was going to be Vrabel. You hear all this smoke.
You guys are clear to wrap whenever.
And what they're going to do, and it might be Ben Johnson and all that. And Tom Brady has a lot to say with that. I caution this. You mentioned what I tweeted. I tweeted about a month ago with all this Brady talk. I said, well, we saw how successful John Elway was when he ran the Broncos with running that team and finding a quarterback. Just because you were a great quarterback doesn't mean you're going to find one for your franchise. So, and that's the thing about this. It's not only coaches being interviewed, it's GMs. I mean, my goodness, I think just about every assistant GM or personnel director with a team will probably have been interviewed by one of these teams looking for a GM by the time the whole cycle of interviews is complete and guys get hired.
Howard, have yourself a good week as we let you go in 15 seconds. Notre Dame or Ohio State?
Ohio State's playing so well, but there's just something about Notre Dame and that defense that I say they just might have enough to pull this one off. I think it should be a great game next Monday. I'm going to say it's the Fighting Irish.
There you go. Howard Balzer, check him out. He is on Twitter at HBalzer721 and on XM, Sirius XM NFL Radio and Cards Wire for USA Today Sports. Appreciate his time. NFL Network's Jane Slater's reporting that Deion Sanders and I'm just ad-libbing here, approached the AD, Rick George, and asked for some more money for NIL and some other resources, and there was some resistance.
It's like yeah, maybe he's doing that on purpose to kind of grease the skids going to Dallas.
Hey, it's a listener appreciation ticket giveaway Thursday. We have a pair of Globetrotter tickets, lower level, at Desert Diamond Arena in February. 602-230-0620. That's 230-06220. That's right. Wow. 602-230-0620.
Yeah.
Easy for me to say on my fifth radio station. And you will win those tickets if you're the sixth caller. It's that easy. It's Rock and Manuch with Jimmy B.